The last thing Melissa Crawford remembered before the anesthesia pulled her under was the sound of her own heartbeat, loud and frantic in her ears, and the surgeon's calm voice saying, "We'll see you in about 9 hours." She was 32 years old, lying on a cold operating table, about to undergo major spinal surgery that could change her life forever. What she didn't know was that while surgeons would be cutting into her spine, her own parents would be cutting her out of everything she'd worked for. And when she woke up 11 hours later, barely able to feel her legs, she would discover that the people she trusted most in the world had committed a crime so calculated, so deliberate, that it would take her breath away faster than any anesthesia ever could. Melissa Crawford woke up from 9 hours of spinal surgery to the steady beep of machines and the antiseptic smell of the recovery room. Her mouth was dry, her body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and her legs felt distant and strange, like they belonged to someone else. The nurse standing beside her bed smiled gently and said, "Welcome back. The surgery went very well," and then handed her something that would change everything. Her phone. "The nurse said this was going off quite a bit during your recovery. I had to turn the sound off so you could rest." Melissa's fingers felt thick and clumsy as she pressed the power button, and when the screen lit up, her chest tightened with immediate dread. 73 missed calls. Her pulse quickened. Someone had died. Someone was hurt. There had been an accident. Something terrible had happened while she was unconscious and vulnerable, and everyone had been trying to reach her. With shaking hands, she scrolled through the call log. Her father's name appeared again and again and again, her mother, her younger sister, Vanessa. Unknown numbers. Her father again. Then she saw it. A voicemail from her father, Robert Crawford, left just 2 hours into her surgery, time-stamped 11:47 in the morning. Melissa's thumb hovered over the play button. Every instinct in her body screamed not to listen, that whatever was on that message would shatter something fundamental. But she pressed it anyway. Her father's voice came through the small speaker, cheerful and casual, like he was calling to chat about weekend plans. "Hi, Melissa. Hope everything's going smoothly in there. Listen, sweetheart. Well, your mother and I took care of something important this morning while you were under the knife. Don't worry about a thing. Everything's been handled. We closed on your condo at 10 this morning. Fast closing, but we got an excellent price. $425,000. Your sister's wedding needed proper funding, and well, you weren't available to sign the papers, so we took care of the documentation ourselves. You understand. Family takes care of family, right? That's what we do. Call me when you wake up. Love you." The message ended with a light, almost cheerful laugh. Melissa stared at the ceiling tiles, those standard white acoustic panels with tiny holes that seemed to swim in her vision. Her condo, her home. 8 years of double shifts at the hospital where she worked as a medical coding specialist. 8 years of skipped vacations, packed lunches, second-hand furniture, saying no to dinners out so she could save every possible dollar. Gone. Sold. While she was unconscious. While surgeons had her back opened on a table, while they were cutting through muscle and moving aside nerves, while she was at her most vulnerable moment in her entire life. The nurse noticed her face had gone completely white. "Honey, are you okay? Your heart rate just jumped. Do you need something for pain? Are you feeling nauseous?" Melissa shook her head slowly, though nothing, absolutely nothing, felt okay. The physical pain radiating from her spine was nothing compared to what was crushing her chest and squeezing her throat. They sold her home while she was unconscious, while she couldn't speak, couldn't consent, couldn't defend herself. Her sister's wedding was in 3 weeks. Melissa could barely move her legs, and in that moment, staring at those ordinary ceiling tiles in the recovery room, listening to the steady beep of machines and the distant sound of other patients and nurses in the hallway, something inside Melissa Crawford shifted fundamentally and irrevocably. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't call for the nurse or beg for sedatives. Instead, a cold, crystalline calm settled over her, the kind of calm that comes when you finally see something clearly for the first time. When all the excuses and justifications and desperate hopes finally fall away, and you see the truth of who people really are. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a miscommunication or a mistake made under pressure or a decision made with good intentions. This was a choice they made, a deliberate, planned, calculated choice. And lying there in that hospital bed, barely able to feel her own legs, Melissa Crawford made a choice too. She reached for her phone again with trembling fingers and made one call. Not to her parents, not to her sister, to her lawyer. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand how Melissa's family could commit such an unthinkable betrayal, you need to understand how she got to that hospital bed in the first place. This story didn't start on March 15th with a surgery and a voicemail. It started 32 years earlier, in a childhood where love always came with invisible price tags and impossible conditions that Melissa could never quite meet, no matter how hard she tried. Melissa Ann Crawford was born on a cold February morning in 1992, 3 minutes after her twin brother Connor, who died 48 hours later from complications no one had anticipated. Her parents, Robert and Diane Crawford, never talked about Connor. They never acknowledged his birthday. They removed every photograph, every hospital bracelet, every single trace that he had ever existed. But Melissa grew up feeling like she was supposed to fill a space meant for 2 people, like she was constantly being measured against an invisible brother she had never known, a ghost she could never satisfy or replace. When she was 4 years old, her mother gave birth to Vanessa, a beautiful, charismatic baby with her mother's striking features and her father's natural charm. From the moment Vanessa entered the world, Melissa understood her role in the family with perfect, painful clarity. She was the responsible one, the capable one, the one who didn't need as much attention because she was naturally independent, naturally strong, naturally able to take care of herself. The difference in treatment wasn't subtle or hidden. It was glaring and obvious to everyone except, apparently, her parents. When Melissa was 7 and Vanessa was 3, Melissa spent an entire month building an elaborate school project, a model solar system made from papier-mâché planets she had painted meticulously by hand. Shocks with handwritten fact cards about each celestial body that she had researched in the library. She won first place in her entire grade. Her parents said, "That's nice, honey. Put it in your room." That same week, Vanessa scribbled a crayon drawing of the family, 4 stick figures holding hands. Her parents framed it and hung it in the living room above the fireplace, where it stayed for 6 years. When Melissa was 12 years old, her father sat her down at the kitchen table after Vanessa's elementary school spring musical. Vanessa had forgotten her lines completely and burst into tears on stage in front of 300 people, and their mother had rushed up from the audience to comfort her, disrupting the entire performance. Robert Crawford stirred his coffee slowly, the spoon clinking against the ceramic mug, Chita not quite meeting Melissa's eyes. "Melissa," he said carefully, "you need to understand something about your sister. Vanessa is sensitive, She's creative and artistic, and people like that feel things more deeply than others do. They need more support, more protection, more reassurance. He finally looked at her. But you're different. You're strong. You're smart. You're resilient. You'll always be fine, no matter what happens. That's a gift, Melissa. That's a real gift. 12-year-old Melissa had nodded, feeling something that seemed like honor in being called strong and smart and resilient. She didn't realize until much, much later that strong was just another word for you're on your own, and resilient meant we won't be there for you when things get hard. The pattern repeated itself over and over throughout Melissa's childhood and adolescence, consistent as clockwork, predictable as the seasons. When Melissa made honor roll every single semester from 6th grade all the way through high school, never once falling below a 3.8 grade point average, her parents said, "Well, we expect that from you. You've always been academic." When Vanessa barely passed her classes, scraping by with C's and D's and the occasional incomplete, they celebrated with dinner at her favorite restaurant and bought her new clothes as a reward for trying her best. When Melissa earned a full academic scholarship to the state university, covering tuition, room, board, and books, essentially a free ride through college, her parents said, "Good. That'll save us a lot of money. We appreciate that." When Vanessa got accepted to a private art institute with absolutely no financial aid whatsoever, just an acceptance letter and a bill for $65,000 per year, her parents took out a second mortgage on their house to pay for it, saying that creative souls need nurturing and investment. When Melissa graduated college at 21 years old with a degree in health information management and a job offer already in hand from a major hospital, her parents missed the ceremony entirely. Vanessa had an audition that morning for a booth at a local craft fair. She didn't get accepted, but it might have been an important opportunity, they said. Melissa stopped expecting them to show up after that. She stopped waiting for phone calls or visits or acknowledgement. She just worked harder, convinced herself it didn't matter, and told herself that independence was a strength and not a life sentence of loneliness. By the age of 25, Melissa was working full-time as a medical billing specialist at a large urban hospital during the day, processing insurance claims and managing patient accounts. And she was waitressing 3 nights a week at a casual dining restaurant, coming home after midnight smelling like French fries and exhaustion. She saved every single dollar she could, tracking every expense in a worn spiral notebook she kept in her purse, writing down every coffee, every grocery trip, every tank of gas. She had one singular goal that kept her going through the exhaustion and the double shifts and the aching feet. Buy her own place. Own something no one could take away. Prove to herself, if not to anyone else, that she didn't need anybody. The back pain started when Melissa was 29 years old, just a dull, persistent ache after someone rear-ended her car at a red light. Nothing dramatic, just a fender bender, the kind of minor accident that happens every day. Insurance covered the car repairs. Melissa went to urgent care, got checked out, was told she had a mild strain, was given muscle relaxers and told to rest. But the dull ache never went away. Over the next 3 years, that manageable discomfort transformed into something that controlled her entire existence. Some mornings, Melissa couldn't get out of bed without crying. She would lie there, tears streaming down her face, trying to breathe through pain that felt like someone was driving a railroad spike directly between her vertebrae, grinding metal against bone. She would hide in the bathroom at work, gripping the sink with white knuckles, forcing herself to breathe slowly, to not scream, to not collapse. Physical therapy didn't help. The exercises made it worse. Medications barely touched the pain. Injections provided temporary relief that lasted days instead of the promised weeks or months. Finally, after 3 years of suffering, the MRI revealed what her neurologist, Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, had suspected all along. Severely herniated discs at L4 and L5, pressing directly against her spinal cord, creating pressure that was causing the chronic pain and threatening permanent nerve damage. "You're young," Dr. Okonkwo had said, studying the scans on her computer screen with a serious expression. "You've tried conservative treatment, physical therapy, injections, medications, everything we typically recommend. None of it's working. At this point, surgery is your best option for any real quality of life. Without it, this will only get worse. You could end up with permanent nerve damage, loss of bowel or bladder control, inability to walk." "How long is recovery?" Melissa had asked, already dreading the answer. 8 to 12 weeks before you're back to normal activities. You'll need significant help for at least the first 2 weeks. Maybe longer. No driving, no lifting anything over 5 pounds, lots of rest, assistance with basic daily activities like showering and cooking. Melissa had nodded, already mentally preparing to do it completely alone, the way she did everything else in her life. She hired a home health aide through an online service, a kind woman named Susan Chen, who would check on her twice daily for the first 2 weeks. She prepped 14 complete meals and froze them in carefully labeled containers with reheating instructions. She moved a twin bed into her living room to avoid having to navigate stairs to her bedroom. She bought a shower chair, a reacher-grabber tool for picking things up, slip-on shoes she wouldn't have to bend down to tie. She created detailed instruction sheets for Susan explaining where everything was located, what medications to administer at what times, warning signs of complications. She did everything meticulously and thoroughly by herself, because that's what Melissa Crawford always did. She took care of herself because no one else was going to do it. The surgery was scheduled for March 15th, a Thursday morning, 7 o'clock arrival time for a 9 o'clock start. The call to her parents that evening in early February, 5 weeks before the surgery date, went exactly as Melissa had expected, which somehow made it hurt even more than if it had been a surprise. "Surgery," her mother Diane said distractedly when Melissa called to tell them. In the background, Melissa could hear Vanessa's voice, laughing about something, music playing, the sounds of people having fun together. "When did you say?" "March 15th, Melissa repeated. "It's a major procedure, Mom. 9 hours, maybe longer. I'll be in the hospital for at least 2 days, possibly 3, and then recovery at home for several weeks. I won't be able to walk properly for a while." "March," her father Robert's voice cut in sharply. He had picked up the extension in his office. "Melissa, that's right in the middle of wedding planning. Vanessa's venue needs the final deposit that week, and we've got cake tastings and dress fittings, and the florist wants decisions." "I'm having spinal surgery, Dad," Melissa said, keeping her voice carefully steady and controlled. "Major spinal surgery. I won't be able to walk for weeks." "We understand that, honey, we do," her father said with audible impatience. "But you've always been so independent and capable. You'll manage. You always do. You always figure things out. That's just who you are." Her mother added quickly, her voice taking on that particular tone of gentle scolding mixed with disappointment. "And you know Vanessa is absolutely drowning in wedding stress right now. She's having panic attacks, Melissa. Real panic attacks. She really needs family support during her special time. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event for her. This is her moment." Melissa had sat there in her small condo, phone pressed to her ear, staring at her reflection in the darkened television screen across the room. She waited. waited for one of them to ask the questions that caring parents would ask. How are you feeling about the surgery? Are you scared? What can we do to help? Do you need us to be there? Can we bring you groceries during recovery? Should we plan to visit you in the hospital? The questions never came. The concern never materialized. The offers of help never arrived. I'll figure it out, Melissa said finally, her voice sounding hollow even to her own ears. That's our girl, her father said, with obvious relief flooding his tone. Tough as nails. You got the strong genes, kiddo. Always been the tough one. They hung up without saying I love you, without saying we're proud of you, without saying we wish we could be there for you. And Melissa sat in the silence of her condo, trying desperately to convince herself that independence was a strength and not a punishment, that being capable was a gift and not a life sentence, that she was lucky to be self-sufficient and not a burden to anyone. She almost believed it. She wanted to believe it. But deep down, in a place she tried not to examine too closely, she knew the truth. She knew she had been abandoned long before that phone call. She had been abandoned her entire life. What Melissa didn't hear during that phone call, what her parents carefully hid from her, what they never intended for her to discover, was the conversation that happened the exact moment they hung up the phone. A conversation that would set an entire criminal conspiracy into motion. Robert Crawford set his phone down heavily on the kitchen counter, sheer to the kind of movement that conveyed frustration and annoyance without saying a word. His wife Diane was already scrolling through her phone, distracted, probably looking at wedding inspiration boards for Vanessa on social media. March is terrible timing, Diane muttered, not looking up from her screen. We still need $80,000 for Vanessa's wedding. The venue deposit is due in 2 weeks. The florist wants payment up front before she'll even order the flowers. And Vanessa wants that designer dress we saw at the bridal boutique. The one that's $12,000. Diane, we've already given them $120,000, Robert said, exhaustion heavy in his voice. How is that possibly not enough money for one wedding? How much does a wedding actually cost? Because Vanessa wants what she wants, Diane snapped, looking up sharply. And this is her special day. She's only going to get married once, Robert. This is her moment. We can't disappoint her. Not after everything. She looked back at her phone, then said casually, as if the thought had just occurred to her, "What about Melissa's condo?" Robert frowned, confused. What about it? It's worth at least $400,000 by now. Probably more, Diane said, still scrolling through her phone. Downtown real estate has been absolutely booming. Condos in that area are selling in just days, sometimes hours, with multiple offers over asking price. Diane, Robert said slowly, warning in his voice, understanding where this was going. We can't just take her condo. She owes us, Diane interrupted, her voice going hard and cold in that way Robert recognized. The way that meant her mind was already made up and nothing would change it. Do you know how much money we spent on her growing up, Robert? Do you have any idea? Food, clothes, school supplies, medical bills, driving her to activities and appointments, birthday parties, everything. Thousands and thousands of dollars, tens of thousands. And did she ever thank us? Really thank us? No. She just kept track of everything like we were running some kind of balance sheet, like she was keeping score, like we were some kind of business transaction instead of her parents. Robert was quiet. The truth was, he had been thinking similar thoughts lately. In his darker moments when the bills piled up and the credit card statements came and Vanessa called crying about wedding expenses. Melissa had always been difficult in her own way, critical, judgmental, She had a way of making him feel like he had failed somehow, even when he was trying his best, even when he was doing everything he could. She gave us $30,000 5 years ago when we were in trouble with the mortgage. Robert said finally, the words coming out defensive, like he was trying to convince himself of something. Exactly, Diane said triumphantly, like Robert had just proven her point. Which proves she has money to spare. She has savings. She has this condo just sitting there, probably gaining equity every year. Meanwhile, Vanessa is drowning in wedding stress and anxiety. She's having actual panic attacks, Robert. And we're supposed to just let her down? Our Vanessa? Our sensitive, creative daughter who needs us? Robert rubbed his face with both hands, feeling the weight of too many years of debt. Too many years of trying to keep everyone happy and failing. Too many years of disappointment and financial stress. Melissa would never agree to sell her place, he said. You know that. That condo means everything to her. She talks about it constantly. It's like her entire identity is wrapped up in that property. Diane's expression hardened in a way that Robert recognized, a look that appeared when she had made a decision and was prepared to do whatever was necessary to see it through. Then we don't ask her permission, Diane said. Robert's stomach dropped, actual nausea rising in his throat. What are you suggesting? What exactly are you saying right now? I'm suggesting we handle this like adults who understand family responsibility, Diane said calmly, as if they were discussing something completely normal and reasonable. Melissa will be unconscious during surgery. She won't be capable of making decisions or signing papers. We have copies of all her documents from when she bought the place 8 years ago. I kept them all for safekeeping, remember? I told her it was in case she needed them for taxes or refinancing. We can create a power of attorney, get it notarized, and handle the sale quickly and efficiently. By the time she wakes up, it'll be done. She'll be angry for a while, but she'll get over it. She always does. She always comes around eventually. Diane, that's fraud, Robert said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. That's illegal. That's actual fraud. We could go to prison for that. Diane waved her hand dismissively, like he was being ridiculous and overdramatic. It's family business, not fraud. We're not stealing from some stranger on the street. This is our daughter, and we're making a decision that's for the good of the whole family. Melissa is always going on and on about family responsibility and pulling your weight and contributing. Well, fine. It's time she actually contributed to Vanessa's happiness for once, instead of always focusing on herself and her own needs. Robert wanted to argue. He wanted to say this was wrong, was crossing a line they could never come back from, was something that would destroy their family forever. But he was tired. So tired of bills and stress and phone calls from Vanessa crying about wedding details and Diane's constant pressure and disappointment. He was tired of feeling like a failure, like he could never provide enough, like he was always letting someone down no matter what he did. You really think she'll forgive us? He asked quietly, not even sure who he was asking, Diane or himself. You really think this won't destroy everything? Diane smiled, cold and certain and absolutely convinced. She doesn't have a choice, Robert. We're her parents. Where else is she going to go? Who else does she have? She'll be angry, yes, but she'll realize we did this for the family. And family is everything. Family is all that matters in the end. Robert wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. So he nodded, and in that moment, sealed his daughter's fate. Over the next 5 weeks, while Melissa prepared for surgery, attended preoperative appointments, arranged for post-surgical care, and tried to manage her fear about the procedure. Her mother, Diane Crawford, was planning and executing a crime. And she was better at it than anyone would have guessed. Diane Crawford wasn't stupid or careless. She had worked in real estate administration for 23 years before taking early retirement at 58. She knew exactly what documents were required to sell a property, exactly what signatures were needed on which forms, exactly how the system worked and where the weak points were. And she knew exactly how to manipulate that system to get what she wanted. Phase 1 of her plan began on a Tuesday evening in late February, 3 weeks before Melissa's scheduled surgery. Robert was at his monthly poker game with friends from work, and Vanessa was out at a wine tasting event with her bridesmaids. Diane sat alone at her kitchen table with a glass of red wine and a manila folder containing copies of documents. Inside that folder were copies of every single document Melissa had signed when she purchased her condo 8 years earlier. Loan papers, title transfers, insurance forms, settlement statements, inspection reports, everything. Diane had told Melissa at the time it was for safekeeping, in case you ever need them for tax purposes, or if you decide to refinance. Melissa had trusted her completely and handed everything over without question. Now, alone in her kitchen under the bright overhead light, Diane pulled out several blank pieces of paper and examples of Melissa's signatures from various documents. She studied them carefully, almost scientifically. The specific curl of the M in Melissa, the way she crossed her lowercase t with a slightly upward flourish at the end, the compressed, rushed way she wrote Crawford when she was signing documents quickly versus the more careful version when she had time, the slight rightward slant of her entire signature, the pressure points where she pressed harder with the pen. Diane began to practice over and over and over. She traced Melissa's signature on scrap paper first, getting the muscle memory, understanding the rhythm and flow. She adjusted pressure, angle, speed. She studied videos online about handwriting analysis and forgery detection, learning what experts looked for, learning how to avoid the telltale signs of a forged signature. By the 4th night of practice, sitting alone at that kitchen table with her wine and her daughter's signatures, Diane could replicate Melissa's signature so perfectly, so exactly, that even she couldn't tell the difference between the original and her forgery. She had become an expert forger of her own daughter's identity. Phase 2 required something more sophisticated and official-looking, a document with legal weight. Diane found a template online for a durable power of attorney for financial and property matters. It was a standard form, the kind that lawyers used every day, the kind used when someone became incapacitated due to illness, injury, or surgery and needed someone else to make decisions on their behalf. Diane filled it in meticulously, carefully, making sure every detail was perfect. Principal: Melissa Ann Crawford. Attorneys in fact: Diane Margaret Crawford and Robert James Crawford. Effective date: she backdated it to January 10th, 2 months before the scheduled surgery, making it look like Melissa had signed it long ago as a precaution, just in case something went wrong during the surgery, just to be safe. The document gave Diane and Robert broad authority to buy, sell, lease, mortgage, or otherwise deal with any real or personal property belonging to Melissa. It was sweeping and comprehensive, and gave them complete control over everything Melissa owned. Diane forged Melissa's signature at the bottom of the document with practiced precision, her hand steady and confident. But a signature alone wasn't enough to make a power of attorney legally valid. The document needed to be notarized to have any legal weight, to be accepted by title companies and banks and government agencies. That's where Dennis Thornton came into the picture. Dennis was 72 years old, Chonit, a retired colleague from Diane's old title company, who still did occasional notary work under the table for cash. He was lonely since his wife died 3 years ago, a bit forgetful, and desperate for any kind of social interaction that reminded him of his working days. Diane called him on a Thursday afternoon, her voice warm and friendly. "Dennis, it's Diane Crawford. How are you doing? How's your garden coming along?" They chatted for 15 minutes about his tomato plants, his arthritis, his daughter who never called, the anniversary of his late wife's death. Diane was patient and sympathetic and kind. Then she shifted the conversation. "Listen, Dennis, I'm calling because I need a favor, and I thought of you immediately. My daughter Melissa, you remember her, she's having emergency spinal surgery next month. Major surgery. Very serious. She's absolutely terrified something might go wrong, that she might end up paralyzed or worse. So she signed a power of attorney document just in case. Just as a precaution, you know how it is. But with all her pre-op appointments and stress, she completely forgot to get it notarized before things got crazy." Dennis made sympathetic noises. "Oh, that's completely understandable. Surgery is so stressful, especially something involving the spine. Of course she forgot." "Exactly," Diane said, relief in her voice like he understood perfectly. "So I was wondering, could I possibly bring the document by your place? I have it right here with her signature on it. She signed it just last night at our house. It just needs your notary stamp and signature to make it official. I'll bring cash for your time. $200 for maybe 10 minutes of work?" Dennis hesitated for only a moment, and Diane held her breath. "Well, technically I'm supposed to witness the signature happening in person, see the person actually sign the document. That's the proper procedure." "I completely understand, Dennis," Diane said smoothly, her voice reasonable and apologetic. "And normally we would absolutely do that. But Melissa is so overwhelmed right now with everything, the surgery prep, the medical appointments, the fear. She's barely holding it together. We're just trying to protect her in case something terrible happens during surgery. This is purely precautionary, just for family protection. And you and I go back so many years. I trust you completely. Between old friends?" Dennis sighed, and Diane knew she had won. Of course. Come by tomorrow afternoon, around 2. I'll take care of it for you." The next day, Diane drove to Dennis's small ranch house on the edge of town, the power of attorney document in a folder on her passenger seat. Dennis was in his garden when she arrived, tending to his tomato plants, dirt under his fingernails. He barely glanced at the document when she handed it to him. He flipped to the signature page, confirmed there was a signature that looked legitimate, and pulled out his official notary stamp and seal. He stamped it carefully, signed his name in his shaky, elderly handwriting, filled in the date, and handed it back to Diane. "Done. Official. Legal. Give Melissa my very best," Dennis said kindly, accepting the $200 in cash that Diane handed him. "Tell her I hope the surgery goes perfectly and she recovers quickly. She's always been such a sweet girl." "I will," Diane said, smiling warmly, her heart not even racing, no guilt on her face. "Thank you so much, Dennis. You're a lifesaver." Phase 3 was finding the right real estate agent, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions, someone who was hungry enough for a commission that they wouldn't scrutinize documents too carefully. Diane deliberately avoided the agent Melissa had used to buy the condo 8 years ago. That woman knew Melissa personally, had her phone number, would definitely want to speak with Melissa directly before listing her property. That wouldn't work at all. Instead, Diane found Janet Torres through online reviews, a newer agent with only 2 years of experience, someone with decent ratings but not so many sales that she could afford to turn down a quick commission. Diane and Robert met Janet at a Starbucks on a Monday morning. Diane wore her sympathetic, concerned mother expression perfectly. "Our daughter owns a condo downtown," Diane explained, her voice heavy with practiced worry and sadness. "She's having emergency spinal surgery in less than 3 weeks. Very serious surgery. There's a real chance of complications, possibly even paralysis. She's absolutely terrified, as you can imagine." Janet's face filled with immediate sympathy. "Oh my God, how awful. I'm so sorry. The medical bills are already piling up astronomically," Robert added, following Diane's script perfectly. "The surgery alone is going to cost tens of thousands out of pocket, even with insurance. And the physical therapy afterwards will be incredibly expensive and could go on for months, maybe even years. She might not be able to work for a very long time. She asked us specifically to sell her condo as quickly as possible so she has funds available to cover everything," Diane said. "She gave us power of attorney specifically for this purpose, knowing she'd be incapacitated and unable to handle it herself. We need to act very fast because the surgery is in 2.5 weeks, and she wants this completely handled before then, so she can focus entirely on recovery afterwards." Janet nodded eagerly, already mentally calculating her commission. "I can absolutely help with that. I completely understand the urgency. Do you have the power of attorney paperwork?" Diane slid the notarized document across the table, looking perfect and official and completely legitimate. Janet glanced at it. Nothing more than a glance, just confirming it existed and appeared to be notarized. She didn't study it carefully, didn't check the signature against any identification, didn't call Melissa to confirm. She had no reason to doubt these concerned parents trying to help their suffering daughter. "Perfect," Janet said. "Let's get started immediately." The condo was professionally photographed on Monday afternoon, listed on the multiple listing service Tuesday morning, with glossy photos and a compelling description. By Thursday afternoon, they had 5 serious offers from eager buyers. By Friday morning, they had accepted the highest offer, $425,000 from a cash buyer who wanted to close fast, a young couple named Sarah and James Mitchell, who were expecting their first baby and had been searching desperately for months for the perfect place to start their family. The closing was scheduled for March 15th at 10 in the morning, exactly 2 hours after Melissa's surgery would begin, exactly when she would be completely unconscious on an operating table with her spine opened and exposed. The timing wasn't accidental or coincidental. Diane had planned it exactly that way, deliberately and precisely. By the time Melissa woke up groggy and confused and in pain, the deed would already be transferred. The money would already be in their bank account. It would be done, complete, irreversible. Robert had one final moment of doubt, one last chance to stop everything on the morning of March 15th as they drove to the title company for the closing. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white, his jaw clenched. "Diane," he said quietly, his voice strained and tight. "This is fraud, actual criminal fraud. If Melissa finds out, if she presses charges against us, we could go to prison, real prison. We could lose everything." Diane applied lipstick in the visor mirror, completely calm and collected, not a trace of doubt or fear on her face. She won't find out until it's already done, and even if she's angry at first, what's she realistically going to do? Send her own parents to prison? Destroy our family? Ruin Vanessa's wedding over money? She looked at him directly, her eyes hard. Melissa has always been overdramatic about boundaries and responsibility and keeping score. She'll be furious for a while, absolutely. I'm not denying that. But she'll get over it eventually. She always does. She always comes back. She's too loyal to actually destroy this family, no matter what she says. And if she doesn't get over it, Robert asked, his voice almost a whisper. What if this time is different? Then she'll prove she was always exactly as selfish and cold as I suspected, Diane said, snapping the visor closed. And we'll know we made the right decision protecting Vanessa. Robert wanted to argue, wanted to turn the car around, wanted to stop this. But he didn't. He kept driving. At 9:47 that morning, anesthesia flowed into Melissa Crawford's IV line, the medication spreading through her bloodstream like ice water. Her neurologist, Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, squeezed her hand gently and said, "See you on the other side, Melissa. You're going to do great." Melissa's eyes fluttered closed. Within seconds, she was completely unconscious, her breathing taken over by machines, her body positioned carefully on the operating table. At 9:58, the surgical team positioned her precisely, face down, her spine exposed and accessible. Dr. Okonkwo marked her lower back with a surgical pen, identifying the exact vertebrae that needed repair, L4 and L5. At 10:11, the first incision was made, the scalpel cutting through skin. At 10:23, 7 miles away in a title company office in a generic office building, Diane and Robert Crawford walked in with forged documents and confident smiles, and absolutely no visible guilt. The title agent, a pleasant woman in her 50s named Brenda Walsh, welcomed them into a conference room with glossy wood furniture and bland corporate artwork on the walls. "Good morning," Brenda said cheerfully. "Is your daughter joining us today for the closing?" "Unfortunately, no," Diane said with perfectly practiced sadness in her voice. "She's actually in surgery right now as we speak. Emergency spinal surgery. Very serious. That's why we have power of attorney. She specifically wanted this handled before the procedure in case anything goes wrong, in case there are complications." Brenda's face softened with immediate sympathy. "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. How frightening for all of you." "It is," Robert agreed, playing his part. "But we're trying to honor her wishes and get this handled quickly, so she has one less thing to worry about during recovery." Brenda barely glanced at the power of attorney document that Diane slid across the table. These situations came up regularly in her line of work. Adult children with medical emergencies, elderly parents needing help with property transactions, families stepping in during crisis situations. Everything looked completely legitimate and proper. The notary stamp was official and real. The signatures looked consistent and genuine. The document was formatted correctly. She had absolutely no reason to question anything or doubt these concerned parents. Documents were signed, multiple pages, initials here and here and here, signature at the bottom. Identification was verified, driver's licenses photographed, wire transfer instructions were confirmed. At 10:47, $425,000 was electronically deposited into Robert and Diane Crawford's joint checking account. At 10:52, before the transaction was even fully complete, Diane pulled out her phone and immediately transferred $300,000 to Vanessa's wedding planner with a memo line that read, "Final payment. VIP package confirmed." At 11:15, Diane texted Vanessa. The message was short and triumphant. "Funding came through. You can confirm everything with the venue and vendors. Your dream wedding is happening, sweetheart." At 11:18, Vanessa squealed with joy and relief, showed the text message to her fiancé, Brandon, and immediately called the wedding venue to upgrade to the premium open bar package and the enhanced floral arrangements she had been dreaming about. At 11:30, Melissa was still completely unconscious, still on that operating table, surgeons carefully and precisely cutting through layers of muscle tissue, retracting tissue, exposing her damaged vertebrae, working to repair the herniated discs that had been causing her years of agony. At 12:15 in the afternoon, Sarah and James Mitchell, the innocent young couple buying Melissa's condo, signed their own closing documents at a different title company across town, absolutely giddy with excitement about their new home. Sarah's hand rested protectively on her pregnant belly. James kissed her forehead tenderly. They had no idea, absolutely no idea whatsoever, that they were buying a home that had been sold through fraud, that the real owner was unconscious in a hospital, that they were about to become unwitting participants in a crime. At 2:40, the surgery was still ongoing, hour after hour of meticulous work. Dr. Okonkwo worked carefully and methodically, removing damaged disc material piece by tiny piece, decompressing the spinal cord, trying to relieve the pressure that had been causing Melissa so much pain for so long. At 3:55, Vanessa posted to social media a photo of herself holding champagne and smiling widely. The caption read, "Dreams really do come true. Wedding countdown is officially on. 3 more weeks until the best day of my life. Feeling so blessed and grateful." The post got 247 likes within the first hour. At 6:30 that evening, the surgery finally completed after 9 hours and 17 minutes total. Dr. Okonkwo stripped off her bloody surgical gloves, exhausted but satisfied with her work. "She did great," she told the surgical team. "Better than I hoped. Let's wake her up and get her to recovery." At 7:42, Melissa's eyes opened slowly in the recovery room, confused and disoriented. At 7:44, the nurse handed her the phone. At 7:45, Melissa listened to her father's voicemail, and her entire world shattered into pieces. The first call Melissa made, with shaking hands and tears streaming down her face, was to Marcus Ellis, the attorney who had handled the purchase of her condo 8 years earlier and who had remained her attorney for various legal matters over the years. Marcus was 58 years old, methodical, brilliant, and had zero tolerance for injustice of any kind. When Melissa had first explained her complicated family situation to him years ago, he had said, "I sincerely hope you never need me for anything beyond routine property matters, but if you do, if they ever cross a line, I'm here." Now she needed him desperately. "Marcus," Melissa said when he answered, her voice breaking. "They did it. They actually did it." "What happened?" Marcus asked immediately. Chico, his voice shifting into professional crisis mode. "Tell me everything right now." Melissa explained everything through tears and pain and shock. The voicemail, the 73 missed calls, her parents selling her condo while she was unconscious on an operating table. Marcus was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was cold and hard. "That's fraud, Melissa. Felony fraud, forgery, identity theft, elder abuse statutes might even apply. This is incredibly serious. They could face prison time." "Can I get my condo back?" Melissa asked desperately. "That depends entirely on multiple factors," Marcus said carefully. "If they forged your signature on sale documents, potentially yes. But we need to act immediately, right now. Don't call them back yet. Don't engage with them at all. I'm coming to the hospital right now with preliminary paperwork. We need your signature on some documents while you're still in the hospital with medical witnesses who can testify to your mental state and your complete lack of consent." Marcus arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, moving faster than a man his age should move, carrying a thick leather briefcase and wearing an expression that would have terrified Melissa's parents if they could have seen it. The nurse helped Melissa sit up slightly in bed, arranged pillows behind her back carefully, brought over the adjustable bed table. Marcus spread out documents with practiced efficiency. "First," he said, his voice calm but urgent, "I pulled the preliminary sale records electronically. Your parents used a forged power of attorney to sell your condo. The closing happened this morning at 10:23, exactly 2 hours and 12 minutes into your surgery, which is extremely suspicious timing and suggests premeditation." Melissa felt physically sick, nausea rising. How did they forge everything? "Your signature specifically," Marcus said. "I compared it quickly to your real signature that I have on file from your original purchase documents. It's very good. Whoever did it practiced extensively, but forensic handwriting analysis will prove it's forged. There are microscopic pressure inconsistencies, slight angle variations, rhythm differences. Your mother probably practiced for weeks to get it that accurate." Her mother. The woman who gave birth to her, who raised her, who was supposed to protect her above all else. Marcus continued. The notary who stamped the power of attorney was Dennis Thornton, a retired notary public who has been flagged twice before by the state for sloppy verification procedures. He clearly didn't witness you actually signing the document, which is required by law. That's a separate crime he committed. "So what does all this mean?" Melissa asked, her voice small and frightened. "What are my options?" "It means we potentially have a strong criminal case," Marcus said bluntly. "Forgery, fraud, identity theft, possibly even conspiracy charges. Your parents committed multiple felonies. With the evidence we can gather, they would very likely face prison time, probably several years minimum. But Melissa, there's a significant complication we need to discuss. The buyers, Sarah and James Mitchell, they're completely innocent third parties. They bought the condo in good faith, with their life savings apparently, had no idea whatsoever that this was fraudulent. They're a young couple expecting their first baby. Legally, you could potentially void the sale and try to get your condo back, but it would destroy them financially and emotionally, and honestly, the court would very likely rule in their favor as innocent purchasers for value who acted in good faith. "So I've lost my home," Melissa said, the reality settling over her like a weight. "The condo itself, yes," Marcus said gently. "That money is gone. Those buyers are protected by law. But Melissa, and this is extremely important, you need to listen carefully. You still own your parents' house." Melissa's eyes opened wider, confusion replacing some of the grief. "What are you talking about?" Marcus pulled out another document from his briefcase. 5 years ago, when your parents were facing foreclosure, you came to me. We created an LLC called Summit Properties. You bought their house anonymously for $285,000 to save them from losing it. They've been renting from you ever since, paying $1,800 per month. They have no idea their daughter is their landlord. Do you remember? Melissa remembered. She had done it out of love, out of obligation, out of inability to watch her parents lose their home even though they had never helped her. "And their lease," Marcus continued, checking his notes. "Their current 1-year lease through Summit Properties LLC expires on April 5th. That's exactly 3 weeks from today, 1 week after your sister's wedding." The irony was almost poetic, almost beautiful in its perfect timing. "Your parents took $425,000 from you to fund a wedding," Marcus said slowly, letting the words sink in. And in 3 weeks, you can evict them from the house they don't know you own. You have complete legal authority to do that. Melissa stared at the hospital ceiling, processing everything, her mind working through shock and pain and medication. Her parents had committed felonies against her. They had stolen her home while she was unconscious and helpless. They had betrayed her at her absolute most vulnerable moment, and she had the power to make them homeless. "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked gently, his voice kind but professional. "This is entirely your decision. No one else gets to make this choice." Melissa was quiet for a long time. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 10. Pain pulsed through her spine in waves. The IV dripped steadily. Machines beeped their monotonous rhythm. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was clear and cold and absolutely certain. "I want to file a police report for fraud and identity theft. I want everything documented officially. I want this on record." Marcus nodded. "That could lead to criminal charges and prosecution against your parents. They could go to prison." "Good," Melissa said without hesitation. "And the house?" Marcus asked. "What do you want to do about the house?" "Draft an eviction notice," Melissa said, her voice steady. "But don't serve it yet. Don't file it yet. I have other plans first. I'm going to that wedding. I'm going to Vanessa's wedding. And I'm going to make absolutely certain that everyone there, every single guest, knows exactly how it was funded." Marcus smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of an attorney who had just been given permission to pursue justice. "I'll start preparing everything immediately." Over the next 2 weeks, while Melissa recovered slowly and painfully in the hospital, and then at home with her hired health aide Susan helping her, Marcus worked systematically and methodically. He filed an official police report with the local police department, documenting every detail of the fraud. Detective Sarah Lindstrom was assigned to the case, a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in financial crimes. She reviewed the forged power of attorney with experts, compared signatures using forensic analysis, interviewed the notary Dennis Thornton, who nervously admitted he had never actually witnessed Melissa sign anything, and built a comprehensive criminal case that would be nearly impossible to defend against. Marcus also prepared formal eviction documentation for Summit Properties LLC to serve on Robert and Diane Crawford, citing lease expiration and decision not to renew as landlord's prerogative, which was completely legal. But Melissa's most important preparation during those 2 weeks wasn't legal or financial. It was emotional and psychological. She had to decide what she really wanted from this situation. Did she want revenge, or did she want justice? Did she want to hurt them the way they hurt her, or did she want accountability and consequences? Her therapist, Dr. Reina Alvarez, whom Melissa had been seeing weekly for 2 years to process her complicated family dynamics, helped her work through it during sessions at Melissa's apartment, since she couldn't travel yet. "There's a real difference," Dr. Alvarez said during one particularly difficult session, between setting healthy boundaries and seeking revenge. Boundaries are about protecting yourself, about saying this behavior is unacceptable and I won't allow it to continue. Revenge is about causing pain to others because you're in pain. "They hurt me," Melissa said, and for the first time since the surgery, she let herself cry, really cry. "They sold my home while I was unconscious on an operating table. While I was terrified I might never walk again, while surgeons had my back opened, they were signing papers to steal from me. They chose my sister's wedding over my literal spinal surgery. How do I not hate them for that?" I know, Dr. Alvarez said gently, and what they did was absolutely unforgivable. Genuinely unforgivable. There's no excuse, no justification, nothing that makes it okay. So why do I still feel guilty? Melissa asked, wiping tears. Why do I feel like I'm the bad person for being angry? Because you've been trained and conditioned your entire life to put their needs above yours, Dr. Alvarez said. To believe that your pain doesn't matter as much as theirs. To think that being a good daughter means accepting mistreatment silently. But Melissa, I need you to hear me very clearly. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to demand accountability. You are allowed to set consequences. That's not cruelty. That's not being a bad daughter. That's survival. That's basic self-respect. Melissa absorbed those words. Let them settle into her bones. Over the next week, she made her decision with absolute clarity. She would go to the wedding. She would tell the truth publicly in front of everyone. She would serve the eviction notice. Not because she wanted to hurt them, though she wouldn't deny there was some satisfaction in it, but because she refused, absolutely refused, to protect people who had deliberately harmed her. Boundaries weren't cruelty. Consequences weren't revenge. They were necessary. The week before the wedding, Vanessa called. Her voice was sugary and sharp simultaneously, the specific tone she used when she wanted something or was annoyed. Melissa, you've been stressing Mom and Dad out so much lately, Vanessa said, without even asking how Melissa was feeling or how her recovery was going. Why can't you just be happy for me? This is supposed to be my special time, and you're making everything difficult and dramatic like you always do. Melissa, still recovering, sitting in her temporary furnished apartment with her walker beside her chair and pain radiating through her back, replied with complete calm. Did you know where the wedding money came from, Vanessa? There was a pause, just a brief hesitation. That's between Mom and Dad and me, Vanessa said defensively. It's not really your business how they chose to help me. They sold my condo, Melissa said quietly. They forged my signature and sold my home while I was having spinal surgery, while I was unconscious. Did you know that? Another pause, longer this time. So what? Vanessa finally said, her voice going hard. Maybe you needed to contribute to this family for once, instead of always being so selfish and focused on yourself. Maybe it was time you actually helped instead of always keeping track of what everyone owes you. You knew I was in surgery, Melissa said, still calm but something cold entering her voice. You knew I was having my spine operated on. You knew where that money came from, and you spent it anyway. That's not my fault, Vanessa snapped. That's not my problem. You're just jealous because you're alone and bitter, and you've always resented me for being prettier and happier and more loved. Now you're trying to ruin my wedding day because you can't stand to see me happy for once in your miserable life. Melissa let the words wash over her like water. Once, maybe even a month ago, those words would have destroyed her, would have made her question everything about herself. Now they just confirmed what she already knew with perfect clarity. I'll see you at the wedding, Melissa said, and hung up without saying goodbye. That night, Vanessa made a choice that would come back to haunt her. She posted on social media a carefully staged photo of herself with mascara streaked down her cheeks, looking devastated and vulnerable. The caption read, "When jealousy and bitterness come from your own family? Heartbreak emoji? Some people just can't stand to see others happy, praying for peace and healing, wedding stress, family drama, stay strong." She didn't name Melissa directly, didn't have to. Anyone who knew their family would know exactly who she was talking about. The comments flooded in within minutes, exactly as Vanessa had intended. Cut toxic people out of your life, even if they're family. You deserve so much better than this. Family should support you unconditionally. She sounds bitter and jealous. Don't let her ruin your special day. Block her if you have to. Melissa read every single comment. She took screenshots methodically. She saved them all in a folder on her computer labeled Evidence. She didn't respond to a single one. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain. She just waited silently and patiently because she knew something Vanessa didn't know. The truth doesn't need defense. The truth just needs to be spoken. And in 1 week, at that beautiful, expensive wedding, Melissa was going to speak it. April 3rd dawned bright and perfect and almost mockingly beautiful. Not a cloud in the sky. Temperature exactly 72 degrees. Light breeze. The kind of day that wedding planners dream about and brides pray for. The venue was Ashford Estate, a sprawling property on the edge of the city with manicured gardens that looked like something from a European postcard, and a ballroom with crystal chandeliers that cost more per night than most people's monthly rent. White roses everywhere, hundreds and hundreds of them. A string quartet playing classical music. 200 guests dressed in elegant cocktail attire and designer dresses and expensive suits. Diane Crawford had planned every single detail obsessively for months, controlled every element, made sure everything was absolutely flawless. This was going to be perfect. This was going to prove to everyone that their family was successful and happy and put together. This was going to be Vanessa's moment. Melissa arrived with Aunt Ruth, her father's older sister, and the only family member who had actually checked on Melissa after the surgery, who had brought groceries, who had sat with her during the worst pain. Both women wore simple navy blue dresses, appropriate but deliberately understated, nothing that would draw attention. They sat in the very back row of the ceremony seating, deliberately positioned where they wouldn't be noticed by most guests. Melissa's wooden cane rested against the chair beside her. Her back still ached constantly, a dull, persistent pain that medication only barely managed. Her hands trembled slightly, though whether from pain or anticipation or fear, she wasn't entirely sure. But her mind was absolutely clear. The ceremony began promptly at 4 o'clock. Vanessa walked down the aisle in her $12,000 designer gown, looking genuinely radiant and beautiful and happy, completely unaware of what was coming. Her fiancé Brandon stood at the altar, smiling, loving, a kind-looking man in his early 30s who seemed genuinely excited to marry her, completely ignorant of the fraud and theft that had paid for this moment. The officiant, a friend of the family, spoke about love and commitment and sacrifice and family and building a life together. Melissa almost laughed out loud at that word, family, but she kept her face neutral and expressionless. When the officiant asked the traditional question, "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace," Melissa remained completely seated and silent. She wasn't going to object to the marriage itself. This wasn't about stopping a wedding. This wasn't about Vanessa's relationship with Brandon. This was about truth. This was about consequences. This was about making sure everyone knew exactly what had been done. The vows were exchanged, words about eternal love and partnership and honoring each other. Rings were placed on fingers, gold bands catching the afternoon sunlight. Brandon kissed Vanessa with genuine tenderness. The guests erupted in enthusiastic applause and cheers. "I now present to you," the officiant announced with joy, "Mr. and Mrs. Brandon Mitchell." Wait! Mitchell. That name hit Melissa like physical impact. Mitchell was the last name of the couple who bought her condo, Sarah and James Mitchell. Were they related to Brandon? Was Brandon connected to the innocent couple who now owned her stolen home? She would find out very soon. The reception began in the enormous ballroom at 5:30. Crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than Melissa's entire condo purchase. Live band with 8 musicians. Open bar with premium liquor. Tables decorated with gold-trimmed china and more white roses and candles. The room probably held 400 people comfortably, but looked perfect with 200 guests. Melissa was seated at table 14, far from the head table, tucked in a back corner with distant relatives and family friends who barely acknowledged her existence, which was exactly what her parents had intended. She didn't care. She wasn't here to be comfortable or social. Dinner was served, filet mignon cooked perfectly, roasted vegetables, some kind of potato dish, champagne flowing freely. Laughter filled the room. Vanessa glowed at the head table. Brandon looked happy. The band played. Everything was perfect. Melissa waited. After dinner, after dessert, after the cake cutting, Robert Crawford stood to give a speech. He walked to the small stage where the band had set up, took the microphone, and smiled out at the crowd. "Family," he began, exactly as he had at the rehearsal dinner 2 nights earlier, exactly as Melissa knew he would. Family is about sacrifice, about supporting each other, about coming together for the people we love. He raised his champagne glass. This wedding represents everything we believe in as a family. Love, commitment. Family taking care of family. His eyes found Melissa in the back of the room, and there was something challenging in his expression, something that said, "You don't belong here. You're the outsider. You're the problem." "And I think," Robert continued, still looking directly at Melissa, "that Melissa should say a few words to celebrate her sister." The room went quiet. Heads turned. Diane's eyes were warning daggers. Vanessa's smile faltered and then froze on her face. This wasn't planned. This wasn't on the schedule. Robert was calling Melissa out publicly, forcing her into a position, trying to make her play the part of the supportive family member or look petty and bitter if she refused. It was a power move, a manipulation, one last attempt to control the narrative. Melissa stood slowly, gripping her cane for support. Every eye in the entire ballroom watched her. She could feel 200 people staring. She walked toward the small stage where the microphone stood. Each step hurt, pain shooting down her legs, but she kept walking. She kept moving forward. She reached the stage, climbed the 3 small steps carefully, took the microphone from her father's hand. He tried to smile, but his eyes were nervous now. He was realizing he might have made a mistake. Melissa looked out at 200 faces, at her sister's wedding, at the most expensive party her parents had ever thrown, at the celebration purchased with her stolen home. For a moment, just one brief moment, she almost lost her nerve, almost walked away, almost let it go. Then she thought about waking up in that recovery room, about 73 missed calls, about her father's cheerful voice on the voicemail, about 3 years of pain and 8 years of savings and a home that was supposed to be proof she mattered. She began speaking, her voice calm and clear and steady. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate Vanessa and Brandon. This is a beautiful wedding, expensive, perfect in every detail." She paused, letting the words settle. "I'd like to explain exactly how I contributed to making this day possible." Murmurs rippled through the crowd immediately. Diane started to stand, but Aunt Ruth, sitting strategically near the front, caught her eye and made a subtle gesture. "Sit down. Don't make this worse," Melissa continued. 6 weeks ago, I had major spinal surgery. 9 hours on an operating table. The surgery was necessary because I'd been living with debilitating pain for 3 years. She gestured to her cane. While I was unconscious, while surgeons were working on my spine, my parents sold my home without my knowledge or consent. Gasps, whispers, shocked faces, conversations starting. They forged my signature, Melissa said, her voice still calm. They created a fake power of attorney. They sold my condo for $425,000 and used that money to pay for this wedding. Robert stood abruptly, his face red. Melissa, this is not the time or place for this kind of drama. You invited me to speak, Dad, Melissa said, her voice like steel. Let me finish. He sat down, and something in her tone made him obey. That $425,000, Melissa continued, turning back to the crowd. That's what funded this wedding. The venue you're sitting in, the flowers surrounding you, the dress Vanessa is wearing, the food you just ate, the champagne you're drinking. All of it was bought with money stolen from me while I was unconscious on an operating table, while unable to speak or consent or defend myself. The room erupted. Guests turned to each other, shocked, confused, horrified. Vanessa stood, her face pale as paper. That's not. She's lying. She's making this up, Vanessa stammered desperately. Melissa reached into her small purse and pulled out a document, holding it up. This is a copy of the forged power of attorney my parents used to sell my home. She held up her phone. And this is a copy of the police report I filed for fraud, forgery, and identity theft, the crimes my parents committed against me. Complete silence now. Not a sound. 200 people frozen. Melissa looked directly at her parents. But I didn't come here to ruin your wedding, Vanessa. Vanessa looked hopeful for exactly 1 second. I came to give you a gift. I came to give you the truth. Melissa pulled out one more document. This is the deed to the house Mom and Dad live in. Diane's face went completely white. Robert swayed like he might fall. 4 years ago, Melissa said, her voice steady and clear. When you were about to lose that house to foreclosure, drowning in debt, I bought it, anonymously, through a limited liability company. I saved you from losing your home. You've been renting from me ever since. You've been paying me $1,800 a month for 4 years, and you never knew your daughter was your landlord. Silence like the silence in a tomb. Your lease, Melissa continued, expires in 5 days, on April 8th. Diane's voice cracked, desperate. What does that mean? What are you saying? It means you have 30 days to vacate the property, Melissa said. I'm not renewing your lease. You're being evicted. Robert staggered backward into his chair like he'd been physically struck. A man at a nearby table whispered, "Oh my God," loud enough for people around him to hear. Brandon stood slowly, his face processing everything he'd just heard, every word, every implication. He looked at Vanessa. You knew, he said quietly. You knew where the money came from. Vanessa reached for him desperately. Brandon, please, I can explain. It's not what you think. You knew, he repeated, and there was something breaking in his voice. You knew they stole from your sister to pay for our wedding, and you spent the money anyway. Brandon, Vanessa said, tears starting now. Real tears. He stepped back from her. Don't touch me. Marcus Ellis, Melissa's attorney, stood from where he'd been sitting inconspicuously at a side table near the back. My name is Marcus Ellis. I'm Melissa's attorney. Everything she has stated is documented and verifiable in court. The condo sale was fraudulent. The police are currently investigating. The evidence of forgery and fraud is overwhelming. Chairs scraped against the floor. Whispers turned to shocked conversations. Some guests stood. Brandon's parents, an older couple sitting at the family table, stood and walked directly to their son. Harold and Judith Mitchell, both looking furious. "Brandon," his father Harold said quietly but firmly, "we need to talk. Right now. Privately." They walked together toward the exit, toward a private hallway. Vanessa tried to follow, but Brandon held up a hand. "Don't," he said. "Just don't." She stopped, tears streaming down her face, her perfect wedding makeup ruined. Melissa set the microphone down gently on the stage, carefully, and stepped down. The ballroom was chaos now. Guests standing, talking, some leaving, some crowding around others to ask what just happened. Diane was crying, her face in her hands. Robert sat frozen, staring at nothing. Vanessa stood alone at the head table, her $12,000 dress suddenly looking like a costume, her perfect wedding disintegrating around her in real time. Melissa walked slowly toward the exit, her cane tapping steadily against the marble floor. Each step hurt, but she kept walking. Aunt Ruth joined her, a hand on Melissa's elbow for support. Outside the ballroom, the evening air was cool and fresh and clean. Melissa sat on a stone bench in the garden, exhausted, shaking, adrenaline finally fading. "It's over," Ruth said quietly. Melissa shook her head. Almost. Inside the building, the devastation continued and amplified. Brandon and his parents emerged from their private conversation 15 minutes later. Brandon walked directly to Vanessa. His face was resolved. "I'm filing for annulment," he said quietly but clearly. "My attorneys will contact yours." Vanessa grabbed his arm. "Brandon, please, you can't do this. I love you. We just got married." "My brother James and his wife Sarah just bought that condo," Brandon said. "Your parents committed fraud. You knew about it, and you spent that money anyway. You built our entire wedding on theft from your own sister." He pulled his arm away gently but firmly. "I can't be married to someone who would do that. I can't." He left. His parents followed. The entire Mitchell family walked out of the ballroom, out of the venue, into the parking lot. Vanessa collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Her perfect day shattered. Other guests began leaving, uncomfortable, not wanting to be part of this disaster. The band stopped playing. The celebration ended. Diane tried to approach Melissa outside, but Aunt Ruth stepped between them like a physical barrier. "Don't," Ruth said firmly. "You've done enough. More than enough. Walk away." Melissa and Ruth left the venue. The perfect wedding had imploded, and somewhere in that disaster, Melissa felt the first small stirring of something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, exactly, but peace. The truth had been spoken, consequences had arrived, and she had protected herself. 2 days later, on April 5th, Summit Properties LLC served formal eviction notice on Robert and Diane Crawford. They had 30 days to vacate. Vanessa's marriage was annulled within 6 weeks. Brandon's family attorneys were ruthless and efficient, citing fraud and deception and material misrepresentation. The marriage was legally voided like it never happened. Vanessa moved back in with her parents in their tiny 2-bedroom apartment, the place they rented after being evicted from the house they didn't know their daughter had owned. She stopped posting on social media entirely. Her online presence, once vibrant and attention-seeking and constant, went completely dark and silent. Detective Sarah Lindstrom arrested Robert and Diane Crawford 8 days after the wedding. They were charged with multiple felonies, forgery, fraud, identity theft. Their attorney strongly advised them to take a plea deal to avoid prison time. 3 years probation. $425,000 in restitution to Melissa. Some permanent criminal records. They took the deal. Prison would have destroyed them completely. The restitution order required them to pay back everything. They had no way to pay it. The wedding had drained every account, every savings, everything. Melissa converted her parents' former house into a transitional living space for women. She partnered with a nonprofit called Fresh Start Foundation that helped women escaping domestic violence and family financial abuse. The house was modified, 3 bedrooms, shared common spaces, completely rent-free for up to 1 year while residents found jobs and rebuilt their savings and their lives. Melissa funded the entire operation with rental income from another property she had quietly purchased. 6 months after the wedding, 6 months after everything exploded, Melissa stood on the small balcony of her rental apartment with a cup of tea, looking out at the city lights. Her back had healed. Physical therapy had been grueling but effective. She no longer needed the cane. She'd returned to work full-time. She'd been promoted to senior medical coding manager. She'd started dating someone, cautiously, carefully, a physical therapist named David, who she'd met during her post-surgical rehab appointments. Nothing serious yet, but something with potential. She'd also started volunteering at Fresh Start Foundation, mentoring women who were rebuilding their lives after family betrayal and financial abuse. One woman, a 38-year-old named Rachel, had been financially controlled by her parents for 15 years. They'd stolen her inheritance, forged her name on loans, destroyed her credit score. "How did you do it?" Rachel asked Melissa during a mentoring session. "How did you walk away from your family without the guilt destroying you?" Melissa thought carefully before answering. "I realized something important," she said finally. "Guilt is a tool, a weapon, and the people who hurt us know exactly how to use it against us. They know that if they can make us feel guilty, they can control our decisions and our boundaries." "So you just stopped feeling guilty?" Rachel asked. "No," Melissa said honestly. "I still feel guilty sometimes, even now. But now I recognize it for what it actually is. Conditioning, programming from childhood. And I choose not to let it control my decisions anymore." "Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them?" Rachel asked. "Ever repair the relationship?" "I don't know," Melissa said. "Maybe. If they ever genuinely acknowledge what they did, take real responsibility without excuses, actually change their behavior. But I'm not holding my breath. And I'm not putting my life on hold, waiting for an apology that might never come." 1 year after the wedding, Melissa received a letter. Not from her parents. From Brandon, her former brother-in-law. "Melissa," the letter read, "I wanted you to know I'm engaged again. To someone wonderful and honest. Someone who values family in healthy ways, not manipulative ways. I almost made the biggest mistake of my life marrying Vanessa. Your courage at the wedding saved me from years of potential misery. I'll never forget that. I also wanted you to know, my brother James and his wife Sarah had their baby. A little girl. They named her Melissa Grace Mitchell. They showed me the letter you wrote to them, thanking them for understanding they were innocent victims and letting them keep the condo. That was incredibly gracious and kind. I hope you're doing well. You deserve every happiness. Brandon." Melissa smiled, genuinely happy for him. She'd lost a home, but she'd gained something far more valuable and permanent: self-respect, the ability to set boundaries, the knowledge that she deserved better than what her family had given her. 2 years after the wedding, Melissa sat in her small backyard garden, the house she'd bought a year ago, drinking morning coffee, watching birds at the feeder she'd installed. Her phone rang, unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello?" "Melissa." Her father's voice. Older, tired, defeated. "It's Dad." She was quiet, waiting. "I'm calling because your mother is sick. Cancer, stage 4, pancreatic. She has maybe 6 months, probably less." Melissa felt something twist in her chest, but it wasn't the guilt she had expected. It was just sadness. Sadness for what could have been but never was. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said carefully. "She wants to see you," her father said. "To talk, before she dies." "Does she want to apologize?" Melissa asked directly. "Or does she want me to make her feel better about dying? Does she want to take responsibility, or does she want absolution without accountability?" Robert was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he said finally. "Dad," Melissa said, "I hope Mom's treatment goes as well as it can. I really do mean that. But I'm not going to visit her so she can manipulate me one last time. Or so you can feel like you have a complete family in her final months. Or so she can die feeling like she was forgiven without ever actually apologizing. If she wants to genuinely apologize, without conditions, without excuses, she can write me a letter. I'll read it. But I'm not walking back into that dynamic. I'm not sacrificing my peace to make her death easier." "Melissa, she's dying," Robert said, disappointment heavy in his voice. "I know," Melissa said, "and I'm genuinely sorry about that. But her being sick doesn't erase what she did to me. It doesn't undo the betrayal. I'm allowed to protect myself even now, even at the end." "You've become so hard," Robert said. "So cold." "No, Dad," Melissa said. "I've become honest. I've become boundaried. There's a difference." She hung up and sat there on her back step, coffee cooling in her hands. She felt okay. Not happy about her mother's illness, not vindictive or cruel, just clear. She'd made her choice. She'd set her boundary, and she was at peace with it. Some stories don't end with reconciliation or forgiveness or family coming back together. Some stories end with distance, with boundaries, with a woman standing in her own garden, drinking her own coffee in a life she built with her own hands, despite everything. Melissa Crawford didn't get her condo back. She never got the family she deserved, the parents who should have protected her, the sister who should have loved her. But she got something more valuable than any property deed or family relationship. She got freedom. Freedom from guilt, from obligation, from the endless, exhausting work of trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it freely or without conditions. She lost a home, but she found herself. And she learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't forgiving people who hurt you. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply refusing to let them hurt you anymore. Walking away, head high, heart intact, soul unburdened, into a life they can never touch again. And as Melissa sat in that garden, watching the morning sun break through the trees, listening to birds singing, drinking coffee that tasted exactly how she liked it, she understood something with perfect clarity. She had survived. She had protected herself. She had set boundaries that honored her worth. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.